Have you ever wondered why Russia and Ukraine, once part of the same country, are now engaged in a brutal conflict? It's a complex tale of historical ties, geopolitical ambitions, and a state of warfare that's ever evolving. Stay tuned as we unravel this intricate tapestry of conflict, power, and survival. Our story begins in 2014 with the Euromaidan protests and the Revolution of Dignity. These were monumental events that shifted the political landscape of Ukraine and indeed set the course for the conflict that was yet to come. The Euromaidan protests, named after Kiev's central square where they primarily took place, were a powerful demonstration of the Ukrainian people's desire for closer integration with Europe and their rejection of Russian influence. These protests were ignited by the Ukrainian government's sudden decision to abandon an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer economic ties with Russia. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets in a display of public defiance that lasted for several months. The Euromaidan protests evolved into the Revolution of Dignity, a movement that sought to uphold the principles of democracy, human rights, and rule of law. It was a pivotal moment in Ukraine's history, a time when citizens demanded a clear break from their Soviet past and a decisive move towards a European future. The Revolution of Dignity led to the ousting of Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych. His departure marked a significant shift in Ukraine's political orientation. The Ukrainian people had spoken and their message was clear. They wanted a government that represented their interests, not those of Russia. But Yanukovych's ousting did not sit well with Russia. It saw the change in Ukraine's political direction as a threat to its own interests. Russia had long considered Ukraine to be within its sphere of influence and was not willing to let go easily. The stage was set for an explosive conflict. This was the beginning of a complex and devastating conflict, a conflict that has since reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe and continues to have far-reaching implications. With the ousting of the pro-Russian president, the stage was set for an explosive conflict. In the aftermath of the revolution, Russia made its first decisive move. The stage was set for a conflict that would reverberate around the world. The Crimean Peninsula, a region known for its strategic importance and diverse population, became the target of this move. Unmarked Russian troops swiftly moved into Crimea, seizing government buildings, strategic sites, and infrastructure, effectively annexing the peninsula from Ukraine. This move was cemented with a highly disputed referendum, a vote that many in the international community refused to recognize as legitimate. Simultaneously, pro-Russian unrest erupted in eastern and southern Ukraine, particularly in the Donbas region. Here, Russian-backed separatist forces began to seize government buildings, proclaiming the Donetsk People's Republic, or DPR, and the Luhansk People's Republic, LPR, as independent states. This marked the start of the Donbas War, a conflict that would be characterized by its complexity and intensity. The separatist forces, while claiming independence, received considerable, albeit covert, support from Russia. This support was a critical factor, bolstering the separatist forces against the Ukrainian military. Despite repeated efforts, Ukraine's attempts to fully retake these separatist-held areas failed. The war in Donbas settled into a violent but static conflict, with many brief ceasefires that brought no lasting peace and few changes in territorial control. While Russia consistently denied involvement, evidence pointed to the contrary. Russian troops were found to be participating in the fighting, further escalating the conflict. The annexation of Crimea and the start of the Donbas War marked a significant turning point in Russia-Ukraine relations, propelling the conflict into a new and more dangerous phase. With the annexation of Crimea, the true scale and intensity of the conflict began to emerge. A conflict that began with peaceful protests had evolved into a full-blown war, one that would have far-reaching implications for Ukraine, Russia, and the entire international community. Fast forward to 2022, and the conflict escalated to a whole new level. Russia, which had built up a significant military presence near its border with Ukraine, initiated a full-scale invasion. Despite Russian officials' repeated denials of plans to attack, President Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, claiming there were no intentions to occupy the country. This invasion, however, was not received quietly by the international community. The world watched aghast as Russian forces pushed into Ukraine. Condemnation was swift and resounding. Countries around the globe voiced their disapproval, many imposing sanctions against Russia and amplifying existing ones. The message was clear. This act of aggression was unacceptable, a blatant violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. But sanctions and international outcry were not the only obstacles Russia faced. Within Ukraine, fierce resistance sprang up against the invaders. Ukrainian forces, undeterred by the might of the Russian military, fought back with everything they had. They were defending their homeland, their freedom, and the principles of democracy on which their nation stood. The invasion was a pivotal point in the conflict, marking a shift from covert operations and disputed involvement to overt military aggression. It was a stark reminder of the high stakes involved, the potential for the situation to spiral towards a broader international conflict. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a glimmer of hope. The unity of the international community and the resilience of the Ukrainian people offered a beacon of resistance against the tide of invasion. Despite the odds, Ukraine held firm, refusing to be subjugated. The world watched, holding its collective breath, as the Ukrainian people stood their ground against the invading forces. Their courage was a testament to the human spirit, to the power of a nation united in the face of adversity. As the world watched in horror, Ukraine stood its ground, supported by international sanctions against Russia. Now, in 2024, the conflict continues with no end in sight. The failed Ukrainian counteroffensive, the refugee crisis, and the tens of thousands of deaths paint a picture of a region in turmoil. The war has not only resulted in an immense loss of life, but has also displaced millions of Ukrainians, leading to one of the most significant refugee crises the world has seen in recent times. The scale of human suffering is immeasurable, and the humanitarian crisis continues to deepen. Russian forces, while seemingly inexhaustible, are showing signs of strain. Leaked documents reveal that Russian ground forces are nearing exhaustion and reinforcements are limited. The depletion of Ukrainian air defenses, on the other hand, makes them vulnerable to Russian air superiority. But the spirit of the Ukrainian people remains undeterred. The ongoing conflict also has far-reaching implications for the global community. The war has strained international relations, and the world watches anxiously as Russia and Ukraine continue to clash. The international community's response to the Ukraine-Russia conflict will likely set a precedent for how such conflicts are handled in the future. Economically, the war has already had significant global repercussions. Sanctions imposed on Russia have not only affected the Russian economy, but have also led to a ripple effect across various global markets. The conflict has disrupted trade and caused a surge in energy prices worldwide, affecting economies far beyond the immediate war zone. The war has also raised concerns over global security. The suspension of Russia's participation in the New START nuclear arms reduction treaty adds another layer of complexity and uncertainty to an already volatile situation. In the midst of this turmoil, potential alliances and partnerships are being closely watched. The involvement of other global powers, such as China, could further complicate the situation and have unpredictable consequences. As the conflict grinds on, the stakes continue to rise, not just for Ukraine and Russia, but for the entire world. In the span of a decade, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has evolved from a political disagreement into a full-scale war. We've traced the journey from the Euromaidan protests and the Revolution of Dignity through the annexation of Crimea and the start of the Donbas War, to the full-scale invasion by Russia and the international response. Currently, the situation remains fraught with tension and uncertainty. While the future is uncertain, one thing is clear: the Russia-Ukraine conflict will continue to shape the course of world politics for years to come.